He once shattered her world, tore her heart apart, and vanished without a trace. But 3 years later, the man who called himself a millionaire CEO will see his ex-wife holding not one, but two little girls he never knew existed. One look, one smile, one innocent question from a child, and everything he thought he'd lost comes crashing back. Can a heart broken beyond repair ever forgive? Or will the past destroy them all before love has a second chance? Hello, beautiful souls. I'm James, and I'm so thrilled to have you here with me today. From the very first moment, I promise you a story that will touch your heart, stir your emotions, and maybe even bring a few tears of love and hope. Before we dive in, let us take a moment together. May your hearts be open. May you find joy and warmth in every word, and may this story remind us all that love, forgiveness, and family are treasures worth holding forever. May peace, hope, and happiness fill your home, and may you always find the courage to heal and to love, no matter the storms you've faced. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Mr. James Family and join our growing family of dreamers, believers, and storytellers. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of this journey. Now, sit back, relax, and let your heart be carried by the story until the very last word. 2 years had passed. 2 long, merciless years that seemed to stretch endlessly, a relentless loop of regret and sleepless nights. Julian walked through his vast apartment, every corner echoing the hollow absence of the life he had lost. The walls were pristine, polished, expensive, but utterly lifeless. No laughter, no whispers, no tiny footsteps racing across the floor, only silence, and the sharp, constant ache of memory. He would sit by the window for hours, staring out at the city lights, pretending that somewhere below they might be living a life he could never touch again. The thought would stab him every time. Maya, Nia, hope, though he did not know of her yet. 2 hearts he had once called his own, now out of reach. Every day Julian felt the cold weight of his mistakes press deeper. Every day he wondered if he deserved even the air he breathed. On his bedside table, in a frame slightly askew, sat the last gift she had given him, a drawing from Maya. The child's handwriting scrawled unevenly across the paper, innocent yet devastating. Mama equals my world. Papa equals lost forever. He had left it there when he could no longer stand to hold it in his hands. And yet, some nights he would take it gently, cradle it as if it were her little hand, press it to his chest, close his eyes, and cry. Silent tears, shaking shoulders, the kind of pain that makes a man feel too small for his own skin. He had not been a father. Not really. Not in the ways that mattered. Not when it counted. And now there was nothing to undo the harm he had caused. The guilt was constant, gnawing at him like a living thing. Every tick of the clock was a reminder of the moments he could never reclaim. He had tried to bury the ache under work, under money, under meaningless gestures of success. But all of it, the power, the wealth, the lavish lifestyle, meant nothing. Because, in the silence of his apartment, he could hear the tiny laughter that no longer belonged to him. He could hear her small voice, the one that once called him Papa, now replaced by distance and caution. He remembered the last time he had held her hand, the stubborn tug of her fingers, the wide-eyed look of confusion and hurt, and how he had turned away, how he had left. That memory was a knife he carried every second of every day. Meanwhile, Cedar Springs continued to breathe with life and warmth, utterly indifferent to his torment. And within that life, Nia thrived. The woman he had once tried to control, to dominate, to win or lose, was now a figure of unstoppable strength. Her business had gone global. Her name carried weight in the world. And yet, despite her triumphs, she had never forgotten the fragile beauty of the life she had built with her daughter. Maya, now 7, had grown taller, more self-assured, sharper. There was a quiet power in her calm, a gentle authority that made Nia's chest swell with pride. Maya had learned to protect herself emotionally, yet she had never lost the innocence that made her human. Even in their happiness, Nia was never blind to the scars left by Julian's absence. Some nights, when the house was quiet and the wind whispered outside the window, Maya would crawl close to her mother, small shoulders trembling with questions that weighed heavier than she could carry alone. "Mama, why did Papa stop loving us first?" Even though Nia had rehearsed 1,000 answers, none of them could stop the shiver of heartbreak those words carried. They cut through her like a blade, leaving her raw and exposed, a mother aware of both her child's pain and her own. And Nia, strong as she was, could only gather Maya close, pull her into the warmth of her embrace, and whisper promises she could barely keep. "You're safe, always. We're together. That's all that matters." Yet the question lingered in the air like smoke that refused to disperse. Julian, far away, could never hear it, and that ignorance was a punishment more potent than anything he could imagine. Sometimes he would imagine hearing her voice again, soft and trembling, full of innocence and accusation. The way she had looked at him when he left, the confusion in her eyes that mirrored the confusion in his own soul. And for a long moment he would imagine kneeling, begging, letting her tiny hand touch his face, searching for forgiveness he might never receive. He had imagined the apology countless times. In his mind it was perfect, tender, full of remorse. Yet in reality he had never delivered it. He had never dared. Because fear of rejection, fear of truth, fear of facing the depth of her hatred kept him away. Every day, the distance between them stretched further. Every day, her life grew more vibrant, more full, and he remained a ghost, haunting only the corners of his own memory. There was a constant ache for connection, for redemption, for the love he had taken for granted. Even the simple things haunted him. The smell of her hair, the sound of her laughter, the small ways she had corrected him when he had been wrong. He remembered her stubbornness, the way she refused to smile when he tried to charm her, how her tiny hand would push him gently, almost accusingly. He remembered the first time she had drawn a picture for him, and how, even then, he had ignored it, lost in his own arrogance. Now, 2 years later, every drawing, every word, every gesture of love he had rejected came back to him as a weight, heavier than any fortune or title he had accumulated. In the quiet moments, Julian felt unworthy of air, of light, of love. The city skyline at night mocked him with its glittering apathy. He had everything and nothing at the same time, everything he wanted except for the warmth of the two hearts that had once been his home. He would stare at her drawing, the jagged letters, the uneven lines, and weep quietly into his hands, ashamed of a man he had allowed himself to be. He did not move from the bedside. He did not speak. He could not. And yet the thought pressed. I have to see her, even once, even if it kills me. Because without seeing her, without knowing she is safe, without knowing she has grown, he could not breathe, he could not live. The silence stretched. The air in the room seemed thick with longing and regret. He pressed the drawing to his lips, kissed the crooked letters, and whispered through trembling teeth, I need to see her, even once, even if it kills me. The words left him raw, shivering, spilling the depth of 2 years of anguish in one fragile confession. He did not know if he could survive the sight, or if seeing her would shatter him completely. And yet the need overpowered fear. He had waited too long. He had lost too much. And now, even if the world itself threatened to crumble, he had to face the truth. He had to find her, had to see her eyes, had to know she was safe, had to know if the love he once lost had survived. The city beyond the window gleamed, indifferent, beautiful, alive, mocking him with all it had that he could no longer touch. And in the center of his chest, a hollow space ached so intensely that it felt like it might consume him whole. But the decision was made. He would no longer hide in his wealth, no longer hide in memories, no longer hide from the pain he had caused. Even if the sight of her would destroy him, he had to see her. He had to feel the risk, the terror, the hope, the despair, all at once. The city lights flickered across his face as he clutched the drawing, heart hammering like a drum of warning. Everything depended on this next step. One step, one chance, one moment to either shatter or heal a lifetime of mistakes. Julian's hand tightened around the edge of the table. He drew in a shaky breath, and for the first time in 2 years, the silence was no longer mercy. It was a challenge, a call he could no longer ignore. The ache of 2 years of absence and longing had grown unbearable. He would face it, or be consumed by it. Either way, he would not hide anymore. Julian looks at the drawing, his lips trembling, voice breaking. I need to see her, even once, even if it kills me. Julian's fingers trembled as they turned the glossy pages of the morning newspaper. He thought he had prepared himself for this moment, but no preparation could have braced him for what he saw. The photograph on the front page burned itself into his vision. Naya stood on a grand stage, bathed in the spotlight, speaking with authority, her voice confident and unwavering. She was radiant, composed, almost untouchable. Her presence demanded attention, and the crowd before her seemed mesmerized. Julian's chest tightened at the sight of her strength. He should have felt admiration, but admiration twisted instantly into something far more painful, because she was not alone. Nestled in her arms was a tiny girl, barely 2 years old. Her soft curls framed a delicate face. Wide, inquisitive eyes stared at the world with trust and curiosity. The child clutched Nia's necklace as if it were a lifeline, as if it carried the heartbeat of her existence. Julian's entire body froze, his vision blurred. His mind refused to comprehend what he was seeing. This girl was beautiful, innocent, fragile, and she was theirs, or at least she should have been. His heart lurched violently in his chest. She has another child? The words escaped his lips before he could catch them. His voice was a whisper, trembling, barely audible. He felt as if the floor had been pulled out from beneath him. The world around him disappeared. All the clamor of the city, the honking of cars, the hum of daily life faded into nothing. All that remained was the girl in Nia's arms, his daughter, a child he had not yet met, and yet the sight stirred something even more painful, a profound sense of exclusion, a gnawing ache deep in his chest that he could not soothe. He reached out as though he could touch the photograph and somehow make the scene real, as though pressing a finger against the glossy page could summon a miracle. But it did not. It could not. The little girl's presence was proof of life continuing without him, proof that time had moved forward while he remained trapped in guilt and longing. Julian's throat tightened painfully. He coughed, swallowed, tried to hold back the surge of tears. It was impossible. He felt a weight crushing his chest, as if the air itself had thickened. And the most unbearable truth struck him. He had not been there. He had missed everything. Every step of her growth, every small laugh, every bedtime story, every scraped knee. And now there was another life he had no part in. He pressed the newspaper closer to his face. He traced the outline of Nia's shoulders. Her smile, composed yet warm, the way she held the child tenderly, effortlessly, the way the little girl's tiny hand curled around her necklace, a gesture of trust, of comfort, of belonging. And he had no claim to it, no right to intervene, no way to touch what had been created in his absence. I wasn't even told, he whispered, his voice cracking, breaking in the silence of the room. The tears fell unrestrained, coursing down his cheeks. For the first time in years, he did not try to hide his grief. He did not try to suppress the surge of emotion. He sobbed openly, body shaking, shoulders heaving. His pride, his arrogance, all the walls he had built around himself crumbled instantly. Each breath was a struggle, each heartbeat echoed in his ears, a relentless reminder of the distance he had created between himself and the life he once had. He had been absent. He had chosen wrong. He had allowed his ego, his fear, his weakness to take precedence over the very people who mattered most. And now, looking at that photograph, he understood the magnitude of his failure in its entirety. There was no excuse, no justification, no escape from the truth staring him in the face. The girl, innocent and unaware, had grown in the shadow of his absence, and Nia, radiant and composed, had moved forward, built something whole and beautiful without him. Julian pressed his hands to his face, trying to stop the trembling. His knees buckled as the weight of regret became unbearable. The cold morning air from the open window did nothing to soothe him. He felt exposed, raw, painfully human. Every memory of the past 2 years surged forward. The times he had imagined holding Maya just once and being stopped by his own cowardice. The nights spent staring at her drawing, wishing he could turn back time. The mornings when he had rehearsed apologies that never reached her ears. Now they were ghosts of opportunity, shadows of what might have been. He saw the truth clearly for the first time. He had lost his chance to be a part of her life naturally. And the new child, small and unaware, represented the passage of life he could not stop. His hands shook uncontrollably. He wanted to reach through the photograph, to pull them both into his arms, to tell them he had changed, that he would never leave again. But he was painfully aware that the photograph could not respond. It could not heal the wounds of absence. It could not undo the years of silence. The tears continued to fall, hot and unrelenting, dripping onto the newspaper. Julian pressed his forehead against the table, closing his eyes, trying to steady his racing heart. The sobs rattled through his chest. Every beat screamed regret. Every thought turned over mistakes and missed opportunities. He felt hollow, broken, more human than he had in years. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as if it had shrunk around the enormity of his realization. His gaze returned to the photograph, lingering on the child's eyes, eyes that mirrored Maya's, curious, trusting, innocent, a reflection of the love he had failed to nurture. The little hand holding the necklace seemed to reach for him, even though it could not. And Julian knew that to see her in person, to face Nia and Maya, would be terrifying. The fear of rejection, of hatred, of disappointment clawed at him. Yet beneath that fear, a desperate hope flickered. He needed to know she was safe. He needed to see the life he had lost, even if it destroyed him emotionally. Even if Maya despised him, even if Nia's gaze cut through him like a blade. He had to go. His entire body trembled with the intensity of the decision. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that the fall could kill him. But remaining where he was felt like death, too. The emptiness would consume him. The silence would suffocate him. And so, with trembling hands, Julian stood abruptly. He straightened his back, swallowing hard against the lump in his throat. He brushed the tears from his cheeks, though more would surely follow. He stared at the photograph one last time, memorizing every detail, every expression. Every detail burned into his memory, etched into his soul. The ache in his chest expanded, mingling with determination. The weight of 2 years of absence pressed heavily upon him, demanding action. He knew that facing them could be the most difficult moment of his life. It could shatter him completely. But it was the only way forward. He could not continue in limbo. He could not continue haunted by images on a page. He had to see them. He had to confront what he had lost. He had to stand before them, humbled and broken, and show the love he had once failed to demonstrate. Julian's breath came fast and shallow, heart hammering violently in his chest. He felt as if every mistake, every regret, every failure of the past 2 years culminated into this one moment. The path ahead was terrifying. Every step would be a test of courage and humility. But he would take it, even if rejection awaited him, even if Maya refused to forgive him, even if Nia never allowed him back. He had no choice. This was not about himself anymore. It was about the truth, about love, about the lives he had almost destroyed. Julian drew a shaky breath. Trembling hands clutched the photograph once more. His lips moved in a whispered vow. I have to go back. Even if Maya hates me, I need to see what I lost. The decision hung in the air, unyielding, like a silent promise to face the storm. And with that, he stepped toward the door, heart pounding, soul raw, ready to confront the past he could no longer escape. Julian stands abruptly, gaze fixed on the horizon beyond the city, voice trembling. I have to go back, even if Maya hates me. I need to see what I lost. Julian's hands still shook from the decision he had made, the newspaper trembling slightly as he held it against his chest. The city outside his window hummed with life, oblivious to the storm raging within him. Every step he took toward action felt like a plunge into the unknown. Back in Cedar Springs, the world had not waited. It had moved forward without him, carrying his past mistakes along with it. And in that world, in the quiet sanctuary of their home, life had blossomed in ways he could scarcely comprehend. The 2-year-old from the photograph had a name now. Her name was Hope, and she was more than a photograph could ever convey. Nia had found her abandoned, fragile, tiny, and frightened during one of her charity visits at a hospital. No parents, no family, only the sterile scent of the hospital and the sterile air of loss. Nia had held her close and whispered promises she had never broken. You're safe now, she had said softly, rocking the little girl in her arms. You're home. Hope had responded with timid fingers curled around Nia's necklace, clutching it like a lifeline to a world she had never known. And over time she had learned to trust. She had learned to love. She had learned to laugh. Maya had taken to her immediately, the protective instincts of a 7-year-old sister kicking in instinctively. She would brush Hope's soft curls back from her eyes. She would smooth the folds of her tiny clothes. She would whisper secrets into the little girl's ear, as though passing down a sacred code only they understood. Mama chose you, just like she chose me. You're ours, forever. Hope would respond with wide eyes and a fragile smile, learning from Maya what love felt like. Nia watched the interactions quietly, her heart swelling in ways she could barely contain. She saw her 2 girls forming a bond, unbreakable, tender, yet fortified with the strength only necessity could forge. You two are my whole world, she said softly one evening as they huddled together by the fire, the glow highlighting the warmth in her face. And yet, even in the midst of this sanctuary, a shadow of past fears lingered. Maya had begun to paint. It had become her way of expressing emotions too complex for words, too raw for conversations she could not have. That day she created a new picture. It depicted 3 figures holding hands, Nia in the center, Hope on one side, and Maya on the other. The lines were bold, deliberate, full of determination. She titled it simply, My Life Now. And for a fleeting moment, a small, fragile smile appeared on her face. But as soon as it formed, it dissolved. Her eyes darkened slightly with unspoken fear. Mama, she whispered, her small voice trembling, what if he comes back? I won't let him near Hope, ever. The words were sharp, yet vulnerable, cutting straight to the core of Nia's being. She lifted Maya's face gently between her hands, brushing stray hair from her forehead. "You won't face him alone, love." "I promise you that," she said firmly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But even as she spoke, a quiet tremor ran through her own chest. The past was never truly gone. It lurked in corners, in memories, in shadows, waiting for a crack to appear. And Maya, wise beyond her years, had sensed it. The innocence of childhood had not shielded her completely. She understood, in the small ways only a child could, that the man who had once held her heart in his hands was capable of returning with intentions she could neither predict nor control. And she was determined, in her childlike yet profound wisdom, to protect Hope, her mother, and herself. The days moved forward, each one building a delicate rhythm of normalcy. School, painting, shared laughter, bedtime stories. Nia's work demanded her attention, but she always returned to the home she had built with her daughters, a fortress of love and resilience. Hope's laughter became the music of the house, a balm to wounds that could never fully heal. Maya continued to grow in confidence, her protective instincts sharpening with every small interaction. Yet, there were moments when Julian's shadow seemed to flicker at the edge of her mind. She would pause in the middle of play, a furrow on her small forehead, as though trying to anticipate a storm she could not yet see. Nia noticed these pauses and addressed them with care. She never dismissed the fears that lay within her daughter's heart, knowing the scars ran deep. Together, they built a routine fortified by love, trust, and caution. Every outing, every interaction, carried with it the subtle awareness that life could shift in an instant. And yet, the bond between Maya and Hope only strengthened. Maya would whisper encouragements, gentle reassurances. Hope would respond with giggles and clumsy hugs, leaning into the older girl with a trust that had been earned over countless moments. Nia watched them, heart full, yet a quiet fear lingered beneath the surface. Because she knew the past was not dead, because she knew Julian's absence did not guarantee his silence. And somewhere deep in the house, in the quiet hours of the night, Maya continued her silent preparations. She painted pictures with lines and colors that spoke of love, fear, and protection. She rehearsed words she might need, scenarios she might face. The wisdom of loss had matured her quickly. She had learned that life was fragile, that hearts were delicate, that some people could break them, even unintentionally, and never be the same. Nia would hear her sometimes at night, soft murmurs, a whisper carried through the air. "I won't let him break us again." Each time Nia felt the truth of those words cut through her heart, a mixture of pride and anguish. She knew that her daughter carried a piece of the past she had not asked for, a responsibility that should never have been hers. And yet Maya had accepted it with courage beyond her years. They moved through the day with careful smiles and cautious laughter. Every glance, every gesture carried layers of meaning. Hope looked up to both women with eyes wide open, unaware of the complex history that surrounded her. But the bond she formed was unshakable, a bond of safety, warmth, and trust. Nia often caught herself staring at her daughters, marveling at the love they had cultivated together. And despite the shadows of what had been lost, there was a fragile hope, a promise that life could be rebuilt, that hearts could heal, even in the face of betrayal. Maya painted more, wrote more, whispered more, all in preparation for what she sensed might come. And yet, there was no bitterness in her voice, only determination. The love she carried was fierce, protective, and unwavering. Each day she strengthened her resolve. Each moment she learned to guard her heart while still loving openly. And though Julian remained a distant figure in her thoughts, a ghost of pain and longing, she refused to allow fear to dictate her life. She had seen what abandonment could do. She had felt the ache of loss. And she would not allow history to repeat itself. Her mind was clear, her heart resolute. and when she whispered into the quiet of her room, the words were ironclad. "I won't let him break us again." They carried the weight of 2 years of pain, of love, of survival, and of unyielding courage. They were a promise, a warning, and a shield all at once. Nia heard those words and felt the tremor of fate in them. She knew the world beyond Cedar Springs could be unpredictable. She knew the past had not fully released its grip. But she also knew that together the three of them, mother, daughter, and little sister, could weather anything. Hope laughed softly nearby, unaware of the storm that lingered in the adult world. Yet her presence was a living reminder of what had been built from loss. And in the quiet moments, Nia held her daughters close, feeling the pulse of their lives intertwine, a rhythm stronger than fear, stronger than absence, stronger than betrayal. The walls of their home held warmth, trust, and resilience, a sanctuary against the unknown. But the shadows of the past still loomed, waiting for the day when they might be tested. And Maya, standing taller in her wisdom than her age suggested, understood this truth with a clarity that sometimes startled her mother. She brushed Hope's hair back, adjusted a tiny sleeve, and whispered again, softly, resolutely, "I won't let him break us again." The words lingered in the air, a shield, a vow, a heartbeat of courage that would carry them through whatever was to come. Maya's small voice trembles, yet remains unwavering. "I won't let him break us again." The city skyline receded behind Julian as he drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that the knuckles shone white. Every mile carried him closer to the life he had abandoned. Every mile stretched the ache within him to unbearable lengths. His pulse raced, hammering against his ribs like a warning drum, a frantic echo of the panic and hope entwined in his chest. Cedar Springs approached like a mirage, a memory from which he could not escape. The familiar streets, once teeming with the laughter of a home that had once belonged to him, now seemed foreign and distant. The trees lining the avenue swayed gently, indifferent to the turmoil that raged inside him. He had rehearsed this moment countless times, each scenario playing out in his mind with varying degrees of hope and despair. Yet nothing had prepared him for the cold, hollow reality he would soon face. He parked the car on the familiar street, its asphalt etched with countless memories, each one bittersweet. Every step toward the house made his chest constrict. Every breath felt heavier, laden with the weight of years he could never reclaim. The old house came into view, and his heart faltered. The windows were no longer open to welcome the morning sun. Boards blocked every pane, sealing away the light and the memories he longed to relive. The yard, once vibrant with the patter of tiny feet, stood empty and silent. The swing set was gone, the garden untended. Everything he had imagined in his return was gone. He reached for the door, his fingers brushing against the familiar wood, but it was cold and unyielding. Locked. He pressed his forehead against it, the grain rough against his skin. The smell of absence lingered in the air. A neighbor approached, gentle but cautious, sensing the desperation radiating from him. "They moved," she said softly, eyes sympathetic. Her words struck him like a blade. "Far away. She's very protective of her girls now." The word girls fell like ice into his chest. Girls, plural. The reality hit him with a force that stole his breath. He staggered slightly, swallowing hard, voice cracking. Do you know where they went?" The neighbor shook her head slowly. "I just know she built a happier life. Happier life." The phrase echoed through him like a cruel refrain. He closed his eyes, fighting the surge of panic, despair, and longing that threatened to overwhelm him. He could see them in his mind, the warmth of their home, the laughter that once filled these walls. Gone. All of it. And he had no right to be there anymore. No place. No claim. Just a hollow ache that would not leave him. He pressed his palm against the door, imagining it was Nia's hand, imagining the warmth he had once taken for granted. But it was only cold wood, indifferent to his guilt. Tears burned his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He could not yet. He had to gather the fragments of courage left within him. The car parked on the street felt distant now, like a reminder of how far he had been from them, how long he had waited to make this return. Every memory of the past 2 years surged forward. Maya's drawings, Hope's soft laughter, Nia's unwavering strength. They were all haunting him simultaneously. He remembered Maya's tiny hands, the way she had held her sister, the protective instinct in her eyes. He remembered the whispered vow, "I won't let him break us again." That vow reverberated in his chest, a warning, a challenge, and a plea all at once. He had no idea what awaited him beyond these boards. No idea if they would even let him near, if they would hate him as he feared. The thought twisted his stomach into knots, making every step feel heavier. And yet, he had to try. He had to know they were safe. He had to see them, even if it shattered him in ways he could not anticipate. His eyes scanned the street, desperate for a sign, a hint, anything that might point to their new life. But the neighborhood was quiet, the familiar faces replaced by strangers. The life he had once known had moved forward, leaving him stranded in a sea of regret. He leaned against the locked door, forehead pressed to the cold wood, trying to summon the courage that had been buried beneath 2 years of fear and absence. He could almost hear Maya's voice in his mind, trembling yet resolute. Her fear, her strength, her love, all intertwined in a way that made the ache in his chest unbearable. He imagined Hope, small and fragile, yet full of trust, resting in Nia's arms. The sight was both beautiful and devastating. He had missed the first 2 years of her life. He had missed her first words, her first steps, her first laughter. And now, even seeing her in a photograph or a news article could not replace the reality he longed for. Julian pressed his hand over his heart, feeling the erratic pulse that threatened to betray him. Every beat was a reminder of the opportunity he had lost, the time he could never reclaim. Yet, even in the midst of despair, a spark of hope remained. He would find them. He would reach them. He would prove somehow that he had changed, that he would not hurt them again. He could not erase the past, but perhaps he could influence the future. The thought was fragile, like glass, yet it was all he had to hold on to. His breath came in shallow gasps, as if the air itself carried the weight of his guilt. And then a small sound, a child's laugh in the distance, made him freeze. The sound was fleeting, distant, yet it made his heart skip in recognition. A reminder that life had moved forward without him, that joy existed even when he was not part of it. He pressed his hand to the door again, eyes closing, fighting the emotions threatening to drown him. The neighbor watched silently, understanding that some moments required distance. Julian's mind raced with possibilities. Where had they gone? What life had Nia built for herself and the girls? How protective was she, really? Would she even allow him near? And what if Maya hated him? The thought of her small, defiant eyes filled with resentment made his chest ache. Yet he could not turn back. Turning back now would mean living with 2 more years of regret. He had to face whatever awaited him, even if it destroyed him entirely. The wind whispered around him, carrying the scent of the past, the faint echo of the life he had once held. He pressed his hand again to the door, memorizing every detail of the boards, every splinter, every crack. A symbolic barrier between him and the life he had lost. He could almost hear the laughter of Maya and Hope inside, mingling with Nia's gentle voice. It was a sound that belonged to him in memory, but no longer in reality. He swallowed hard, trying to steady the trembling in his hands and legs. The sky above Cedar Springs had begun to darken, the first hints of evening brushing the town in muted golds and purples. And yet he remained rooted in place, unwilling to leave, unwilling to face the unknown without confronting the pain head-on. He whispered into the cold, empty air, his voice breaking, raw, filled with desperation. "Nia, please don't let it be too late." The words hung between him and the locked door, fragile yet potent, a plea, a confession, a prayer. And for the first time in years, he understood that hope and fear were intertwined, inseparable, that to see them again, to rebuild what had been lost, he would have to face both fully. The shadows of the past loomed behind him, but for the first time he stepped toward them, unwilling to retreat. Each step he imagined in his mind was measured, deliberate, yet trembling with anticipation. The ache in his chest grew sharper, a painful reminder that love carried both joy and devastation in equal measure. He pressed his hand once more to the boards, imagining he could feel Nia's warmth, the small pulse of life within. But all he felt was the cold wood, a reminder of the distance, the absence, the life that had moved forward without him. He straightened his back, drawing in a shaky, deliberate breath. The fear of what awaited him was immense, yet it could not stop him. The life he had lost was waiting, somewhere beyond the horizon, and he had to find it. The air felt heavier now, charged with possibility, with the tension of a moment that could change everything. Julian's pulse raced, hands trembling, heart aching with anticipation and fear intertwined. He pressed his forehead to the door again, whispering, almost pleading with the universe, "Nia, please, don't let it be too late." Julian's voice trembles, raw and desperate, as he leans against the empty boarded house. "Nia, please, don't let it be too late." Julian stood at the edge of the festival, the warm glow of lanterns casting flickering light across his face. The sound of music, laughter, and chatter filled the air, a contrast to the storm raging within him. He had followed whispers, traced leads, and followed his own heart across cities and streets, all to arrive here, in the middle of a world that had moved forward without him. The air smelled of sweet pastries, flowers, and excitement, but he hardly noticed. All he could see, all he could feel, was them. Nia moved gracefully through the crowd, hope cradled gently in her arms. Her eyes were soft, focused entirely on the little girl, radiant with patience and love. Maya walked beside her, hand clutching her mother's dress like an anchor in the world. Her gaze was vigilant, protective, yet there was pride in her posture, in the small lift of her chin. Julian's chest tightened. They looked so whole, so complete, so unbroken by his absence. A family that had survived him, had thrived without him, and now shone in the warmth of life he had abandoned. Every step they took together twisted his stomach, each laugh a reminder of what he had lost. And yet his feet remained rooted to the ground, paralyzed by the sheer weight of seeing them again. He could feel the blood pounding in his ears, drowning out everything else. He wanted to call out, to run forward, to sweep them both into his arms. But fear held him back, fear of rejection, fear of Maya's small, fierce judgment, fear of Nia's unwavering resolve. He had no right, not anymore. Hope stirred in Nia's arms, tiny fingers curling around her mother's dress. Her dark eyes followed a lantern floating into the night sky. A smile broke on her small face, innocence untainted by the shadows of the past. But then she noticed him. The stranger standing a few feet away, eyes brimming with confusion, longing, and grief. She tugged at Nia's sleeve, her little voice fragile yet curious. "Mama, who is that sad man?" The words pierced Julian like a blade, a knife twisting slowly inside his chest. The way she said sad, not angry, not frightened, just sad, struck him harder than any accusation could. His hands shook. His knees threatened to give way. He could barely breathe, as if the air itself had thickened around him. His eyes followed every movement, every small gesture, every laugh, every tilt of Nia's head toward Hope. They were alive, they were vibrant, they were safe. They had survived, and he had only observed. For 2 long years he had only watched from afar, and now here they were, tangible, beautiful, and unreachable. He wanted to take a step forward. He wanted to call out, to beg for a chance, to apologize, to explain, to prove he had changed. But the fear of shattering this fragile equilibrium froze him in place. He could see the bond between Nia and Hope, delicate yet unbreakable. The way Nia's arms cradled the little girl, the gentle tilt of her head, the soft murmur of reassurance. It was a picture of love, pure and complete. And Maya, by her side, her small hand gripping her mother's dress, was both protector and participant in this circle of love. Julian's heart ached. He could feel the pull of memory, the weight of loss, the sting of mistakes replaying like a relentless film in his mind. Every misstep, every moment of absence, every selfish choice came crashing down with renewed intensity. He could see the sunlight glinting off Maya's hair, the curve of her smile, the careful way she adjusted Hope's blanket. It was ordinary, it was beautiful, and it was a family that had thrived despite him. His stomach knotted. His mind screamed at him to run, to hide, to collapse in the quiet shadows. But a part of him, the part that had never truly given up, urged him forward. He had to try. He had to face them, even if it meant humiliation, rejection, or pain beyond comprehension. The music of the festival faded into the background, replaced by the rhythmic pounding of his own heartbeat. He could hear the whisper of his past mistakes, mingling with the present reality. Every laugh of Maya and Hope was a melody he had almost forgotten, yet it resonated within him with haunting clarity. The sight of Nia, radiant and serene, holding Hope in her arms, shook him to his core. Her presence was both a reminder and a challenge. She had moved forward, she had healed, and she had created a life in which he had no place. Yet he still longed to belong. Julian's breath caught in his throat as the little girl in Nia's arms turned her gaze toward him again. She studied him, eyes wide with curiosity, unaware of the weight of his identity. Hope's innocence contrasted sharply with his tumultuous emotions. He wanted to step forward, to speak, to apologize, to promise that he would never leave again. But the words caught in his throat. The fear of rejection, the dread of witnessing their judgment paralyzed him. And then Maya's small voice broke through the haze of his thoughts. She turned, slowly. Her eyes met his. The recognition was instantaneous. Shock, hurt, confusion, all intertwined in her wide young eyes. The single word she whispered shook him to his core. Papa. It was both an accusation and a plea, a reflection of 2 years of absence, of longing, of heartbreak. The world seemed to stop around them. The music, the laughter, the glow of lanterns, all faded into silence. All that remained was her gaze, piercing and filled with questions he had no right to answer. Julian's body went rigid. Every nerve ending thrummed with anticipation, fear, and desperation. He wanted to reach out, to close the distance between them in a heartbeat, but he knew he had no claim, no right, no entitlement. Not yet. His mind raced through the memories of every misstep, every selfish choice, every time he had failed them. And yet, here they were, alive, whole, beautiful, and staring at him with a mixture of recognition and hesitation. The ache in his chest deepened, mingling with a desperate hope. Could they forgive him? Could they even listen? Or would this encounter only confirm their pain, his failures, and the years he had lost? Julian's throat tightened. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to remain upright, to breathe, to confront what he had once avoided. Every heartbeat echoed in his ears. Every blink seemed to stretch time. He wanted to explain, to plead, to beg for understanding. But he knew that words alone were insufficient. Actions would have to speak louder than years of absence. He could not erase the past. He could not reclaim what had been lost. All he could do was try to prove that he had changed, that he was worthy of the fragile trust he once shattered. And yet, fear remained, whispering that he had already waited too long, that he might have missed his chance forever. The lanterns swayed in the evening breeze, casting dancing shadows across the ground. They seemed to mock him, beautiful yet distant, fleeting yet permanent. The warmth of the festival seemed alien, a cruel contrast to the cold reality of his absence. But he could not retreat. He could not leave. Not when the possibility of redemption hovered just beyond reach. Hope's small hand tugged at Nia's sleeve again, drawing Julian's gaze. The innocent curiosity in her eyes was unbearable, a reminder of the life he could touch, the life he could ruin, the life he had already abandoned. Julian took a slow, measured breath. His body ached, his chest burned, and his mind screamed in chaos. Yet, he remained rooted to the spot, facing the consequences of years of mistakes. Every muscle in his body trembled with anticipation and fear. Every thought was consumed by the two little girls he had failed to protect, the woman he had failed to honor, the family he had once shattered. And then Maya's gaze held his. Her wide eyes, filled with shock, hurt, and the weight of history, demanded an answer. He could only stand there, frozen, overwhelmed, broken, yet unwilling to turn away. Maya's small voice trembles with shock and pain, eyes brimming with tears. "Papa!" Julian froze when he heard it, that tiny, trembling word falling from Maya's lips like a stone dropped into a silent lake. "Papa!" The sound of it nearly brought him to his knees right there, but something inside him forced him forward instead. One small, hesitant step, only one. His heart hammered painfully against his ribs, as if begging to break free. He lifted a shaking hand, palm open, empty, harmless. "Maya, sweetheart, The words barely left his mouth before she moved. She stepped in front of Nia and Hope with a speed and certainty that stabbed him right through the heart. Her tiny frame stood tall, shoulders squared, chin trembling, but raised. Her chest rose sharply, breath shaky but determined. Tears glazed her big, innocent eyes, turning them into shining oceans of hurt. "Don't come closer." Her voice was thin, cracked, breaking on every syllable, but strong enough to freeze him where he stood. "Not unless you can promise." She swallowed hard, lips quivering, hands balled into fists at her sides. "You won't break us again." The world tilted. The festival lights blurred. The music suddenly sounded distant, wrong, too cheerful for this moment. Julian felt his knees weaken, not from exhaustion but from the crushing weight of her words. He didn't fight it. He didn't try to stand taller or pretend to be stronger. He let himself fall. Right there on the festival street, he dropped to his knees in front of her. The sound of them hitting the ground echoed in his bones. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Strangers slowed their steps. Lanterns swayed overhead. But Julian didn't care. He couldn't care. Nothing mattered but the little girl standing before him with shaking lips and eyes full of storms he caused. "Maya." His voice was barely a breath. "I'm sorry." He lifted his palms toward her, open, trembling, desperate. "I'm sorry." His chest tightened. He spoke again, softer, breaking. "I'm sorry every day." The truth spilled out in fragments. "You were right. I wasn't a father." His voice cracked, the confession scorched with self-disgust. "I was a wound." The words hit her. She flinched. Just a tiny movement, but Julian caught it. Her tears spilled harder. Because she knew. Because she remembered. Because he had carved those wounds himself. Maya, his voice trembled. I know I hurt you. I know I left you with questions no child should ever ask. Tears fell down her cheeks like soft rain. Her lips trembled before her voice finally broke free, raw and shaking. Then why? Her small hands shook violently. Why did you leave us? Nia's breath caught behind her, but she didn't interfere. This was Maya's moment. Her pain. Her voice. Her right. Why didn't you fight for me? Maya whispered. The smallest question, but the heaviest weight. It crushed him. He dropped his head, shoulders shaking, breath collapsing in his chest. Because, he forced out, voice ragged. Because I was a coward. The word tasted like poison. And because, his throat closed, his eyes burned. I didn't know how to love. He lifted his gaze to her, broken and exposed. Not until I lost you. A sob escaped her, small, sharp, and devastating. Hope flinched at the sound. Nia tightened her hold on the toddler. But Maya didn't step back. She didn't hide. She let her heartbreak show. I needed you. The soft whimper gutted him entirely. His face crumpled, his hands lowered to the ground, fingers curling into the dirt as if trying to ground himself in the pain. I know, he choked. I know you needed me, and I wasn't there. He shook his head, tears dripping onto the pavement. I should have fought. I should have protected you. I should have stayed. He lifted his face again, palms open, begging without words. I'm sorry. He said it with every breath left in him, every piece of his breaking heart, every regret carved into his soul. Maya stared at him, this man kneeling at her feet, shattered beyond recognition. He wasn't the cold, distant figure she remembered. He wasn't the storm that broke her world. He was something else now, something wounded, something desperate, something human. Her lips parted, her eyes shimmered with fear, with longing, with anger, with the fragile, trembling hope she didn't want to admit she still carried. And then, she whispered the one truth she didn't know how to soften. Maya's voice trembles through tears, barely audible. I don't know if I can trust you again. Nia stepped forward slowly, her arms tightening around Hope as if the little girl were the last piece of steady ground beneath her feet. The lantern lights flickered across her face, revealing exhaustion, strength, and the bruises of memories she never wanted to reopen. Julian looked up at her from the ground, his eyes red, his breath broken, his heart exposed for the first time in years. He wasn't the arrogant CEO the world feared. He wasn't the untouchable billionaire everyone admired. He was just a man kneeling in front of the family he once destroyed. Nia, he whispered, the name caught in the trembling between guilt and hope. I'm not asking for your love. His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. Just let me be better. Let me try. The wind brushed Nia's hair back as if making room for truth. Her voice came low, steady, softer than anger, heavier than forgiveness. Trying is not enough, she said. Her eyes didn't flinch from his. Not if it's temporary. Julian's shoulders sank as though the weight of every mistake pressed him deeper into the dirt. He knew what she meant. He remembered every moment he'd promised change, then walked away anyway. We suffered, Nia continued. Her voice trembled, but her spine stayed straight. You changed only when it benefited you, and when you didn't need us anymore. You vanished. Hope squirmed gently in her arms, sensing the tension in the air, though too young to understand its roots. Maya stood beside Nia, wiping her cheeks with her small hand, watching every second with cautious hope. Julian's chin quivered. He looked at Nia the way a drowning man looks at the shore. Then let me prove it isn't temporary, he whispered. Let me earn every second. Let me earn Maya. Let me earn forgiveness. The crowd around them moved like blurred colors. Festival music, distant laughter, vendors calling out. But none of it reached their circle. Their pain created its own silence. Nia's heart twisted. This man, the man she once built a future around, the man who shattered that future with his own hands. He was kneeling as if each breath was an apology. She inhaled slowly. "Julian," she murmured, "I don't want to hate you, but I did. For a long time." Julian squeezed his eyes shut, the words slicing deeper than any insult. "You didn't just walk away from me," Nia said, her voice tight. "You walked away from our daughter. You walked away from the nights she cried herself to sleep, asking why you didn't want her. You walked away from her birthdays, her fevers, her first steps, her first words." Julian bowed his head lower, forehead nearly touching the ground. Every sentence landed like stones on his back. "And then," Nia whispered, her voice breaking, "you didn't even call." Julian's breath cracked loudly enough for Maya to flinch. He lifted his face, wet and raw. "I know," he said. "I know what I did, and I live with it every day." Nia studied him, really studied him, searching for the man she once loved. She didn't find him, but she found someone else. Someone humbled, someone wounded, someone trying. Her voice softened just a little. "You hurt me," she whispered, "but you hurt Maya more." Julian turned to Maya, small, brave, trembling with the weight of grown-up scars she never should have carried. He reached a hand toward her, then froze, letting it fall when he realized he had no right to touch her yet. "If she gives you a chance," Nia continued quietly, "I won't stand in her way." Julian's breath shuddered out of him as if she had handed him both mercy and punishment at once. He turned to Maya slowly, gently, as though she were made of the very pieces he once broke. "Sweetheart," his voice barely left him, "can you give me one chance?" His voice cracked again. "Not for me, but for your heart?" Maya wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Her small chest heaved. Her gaze flickered between her mother and the father who once threw away her world. "You left us," she whispered. Her voice shook like a thin branch in storm wind. "You hurt Mama. You hurt me." Julian swallowed hard, his throat tight with shame. "I know." His voice broke. "I know, and I can't undo it. But I can spend the rest of my life trying to fix what I broke." Maya's next tear fell silently. Hope looked between them, sensing tension though, too young to name it. She pressed her tiny hand to Maya's leg in comfort. Maya took a trembling step forward. Julian gasped softly, as if afraid to even breathe wrong. "One chance," Maya whispered. Her voice was small but fierce. "But if you hurt Mama or Hope, I'll walk away forever." Julian pressed a trembling hand to his chest, as if steadying his racing heart. His breaths came in shaky waves. He looked at Maya with a mixture of awe and agony. "Maya," he whispered. His voice collapsed into a whisper so thin it almost wasn't there. "I'd rather die than hurt you again." Maya blinked, stunned by the intensity, the rawness, the truth leaking from every word he spoke. Around them, festival lights flickered, lanterns swayed, and the world continued moving, despite three broken hearts trying to learn how to stand together again. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoed behind them, cold, sharp, and unwelcome. "Interesting reunion, Julian. Too bad you didn't tell them the truth." Weeks passed, each day a thread weaving fragile trust back into existence. Julian showed up quietly, without announcement. He didn't bring gifts wrapped in shiny paper. He didn't force hugs he had no right to claim. He didn't demand forgiveness. He simply appeared, letting the rhythm of his presence speak louder than words ever could. Each day he found himself waiting outside Maya's school, heart pounding, hands clammy, voice caught in his chest. And every time she saw him, she measured. Careful, watchful, hesitant, but slowly a smile cracked through her defenses. Julian learned to walk beside her without overstepping, without trying to fix everything at once. He learned to listen, to watch, to wait. Hope, curious as ever, began to giggle at him when he sang her favorite song off-key, face red, hands waving in awkward rhythm. He stumbled through her laughter like a novice, but she didn't mind. He apologized often, without excuses, without preambles, without hoping for immediate absolution. "I know I was wrong," he said. "I know I hurt you. I will spend every day trying to make it right." Nia watched quietly from the edges, heart twisting, torn between the fear of trusting again and the flicker of hope she thought she had buried. Maya began to speak to him in small fragments, telling stories about her day, asking questions about nothing important, simply testing the waters. Julian absorbed each word like a lifeline. He did not interrupt. He did not correct. He just listened. He rebuilt what he had broken, brick by brick, tear by tear. Sometimes it was painfully slow. Sometimes his mistakes slipped back in. A misstep, a flinch, a word said too sharp, and Maya would retreat for a moment, distant, wary. But he never gave up. Every evening he would recount his day, recount hers, recount every small triumph and trial. He learned Hope's favorite foods, her silly expressions, the way she pressed her thumb into her palm when tired. He remembered Maya's favorite flowers, the patterns she liked in her drawings, the way her voice changed when excited or scared. He even learned how to cook pancakes the way she liked, burnt edges and all, because sometimes perfection didn't matter. Love did. Maya started to let him help with small things, a backpack here, a scarf there, a hug for Hope that wasn't forced, but invited. Nia began to notice subtle shifts in herself. The warmth that Julian brought with quiet consistency, the patience he displayed, the humility he showed. It was not loud, it was not grand, it was steady, healing in the small moments. Hope, who had once only clung to Nia, began climbing into Julian's arms voluntarily. Her laughter ringing, pure and unafraid, filling spaces that had been hollow for years. Maya's defenses softened gradually, not erased, but pliable enough to allow tenderness in small doses. One quiet evening they all walked by the river, lanterns reflecting in the water like tiny stars dancing in the gentle current. Maya's small hand hesitated in Julian's palm, then slipped into it. Her fingers curled gently around his, tentative but deliberate. "Papa," she whispered, "I think my heart is ready now." Julian's tears fell instantly, unchecked, sliding down his face like a river released from a dam. Nia's chest tightened as memories flooded, pain, heartbreak, but also the tiny flickers of hope that never quite died. He turned to her, voice trembling, heart raw. "Nia, thank you for giving me a chance to be the man I should have been." Her lips quivered, voice shaking under the weight of everything they had endured. "Maybe love doesn't die," she whispered back. "Maybe it just waits for the right version of us." Julian stepped closer, careful not to rush, but determined to close the space years of mistakes had carved. He cupped her cheek with gentle fingers, eyes glistening. "I spent years loving you wrong. Let me spend the rest of my life loving you right." Nia's eyes filled with tears, but not just sorrow, hope, relief, forgiveness and love mingled in her gaze. She reached out and whispered the words that had waited to be said, soft and absolute. "Welcome home, Julian." Hope giggled, spinning in the arms of both parents, a little bridge of joy binding them together. Maya hugged both her parents tightly, small arms encircling their hearts and souls. The world felt quiet around them, the festival lights dimmed in their minds, the river's soft ripples echoing serenity. The past, heavy and cruel, could not undo the present they were building. They walked slowly, hand in hand, hearts synchronizing with each step. Julian promised silently with every glance, every touch, every careful word, that he would never falter again. Nia watched him, steadying herself, realizing the man she loved had truly returned, not perfect, but transformed through humility, patience, and unwavering love. Maya, no longer afraid, held Hope's hand and Julian's, completing the circle. Hope's laughter bubbled up like a cleansing river, washing away the last shadows of fear. Julian whispered soft apologies to the wind, to the years lost, to the little hearts he had broken. Knowing that actions had replaced words now, Nia's hand found his again, squeezing, grounding both of them. The sun dipped low, painting Cedar Springs in gold, highlighting a family reborn from pain, perseverance, and hope. No past mistakes could reach them here. Only the present, vivid, tangible, whole. Julian lifted both girls gently, twirling them in small, careful circles as Nia laughed softly, joining in the quiet jubilation of being together again. He held them closer, memorizing the weight of their bodies, the warmth of their skin, the scent of their hair. Every day since his return, he had rebuilt trust. Tonight he finally felt its tender roots in their smiles. Maya rested her head against his shoulder, whispering, "I love you, Papa," small words heavy with years of longing. Julian pressed his forehead against hers, voice breaking, "I love you, my little girl, more than words could ever say." Nia leaned against him, letting herself exhale fully, allowing love, relief, and forgiveness to flow freely. Hope nestled into Nia's shoulder, murmuring giggles and tiny promises. Julian kissed Nia's hand softly, tears falling, whispering, "Thank you for letting me come home." Nia smiled through tears, replying, "Thank you for finally showing us the man you were meant to be." The golden sunset bathed them in warmth, a world painted perfectly around a family that had endured storms, survived absence, and now stood whole. The river shimmered, reflecting their laughter, their tears, their hearts united once more. Each step forward felt sacred, deliberate, full of promise. Julian's eyes met Nia's one last time, silently vowing to protect, cherish, and love them for the rest of his days. Maya's small hand tightened around his. Hope clapped happily, unaware of the gravity but sharing the joy fully. And as they walked together along the riverbank, lanterns twinkling above, laughter echoing softly, the family became whole again. The pain of the past remained only as a lesson, a shadow that made the present brighter. No more running, no more leaving, no more doubts, only love, steady and strong, knitting the broken threads of their hearts into one. They stopped at the water's edge, hands intertwined, hearts synchronized, breaths mingling in quiet harmony. Julian whispered softly, "We're home." Nia smiled through tears. "We're home." Maya and Hope giggled together, small voices mingling like music. And under the soft sunset of Cedar Springs, the world seemed right again. The family had been reborn, healed, and made unbreakable by the trials they had survived. Julian held both girls, Nia by his side, whispering into the golden sunset, "No more shadows, no more mistakes. From now on, we are forever."